Okay, thank you all for joining us. It's so nice to see so many people online and so many people here in the house. So it's a real treat starting a new sefer, a new book, the Book of Shemos, with new vigor and excitement. And as we said last week's Parsha, Chazak, Chazak, Manis, Chazek, let's become stronger as we start the Book of Shemos. We're on page 292 in the Hebrew, 293 in the English. And before we start with the actual words of the Torah, where I just want to give sort of a little background to the Book of Shemos, at least a Sefer Shemos, and sort of the connection from last week's Parsha. We mentioned this a little bit in last week's class, when we're talking about Chazak, that the separation between the Book of Bereshis and the Book of Shemos is slightly different than the separation between Shemos and Vayikra and Bamidbar and Devarim. Meaning to say what? That it's really a new episode. For all intents and purposes, it's a new season. We had the Book of Bereshis is about the creation of the world, Avram Avinu, the Avos, the Shvatim, right? Sort of the Jewish people's, roots. Finding the Jewish people's roots with our forefathers and the Shvatim, the 12 tribes. And the whole episode of how they got down to Mitzrayim. And the Book of Shemos continues that narrative with the Jewish people in Mitzrayim in Egypt, and the beginning of the exile, which that exile then led to the formation of the Jewish people with the exodus of Egypt, the 10 plagues, the splitting of the sea, and finally the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai on Shavuos. Right, so, and then it continues with the Jewish people's travel, and really till the end of Devarim, it goes and talks about 40 years. It's really all in the 40 years of the Jewish people's travel. So the Book of Bereshis, one book, right, is they say it's about 2,100 years, something like that, give or take, right, from the beginning of creation, and then from the Book of Shemos until the rest of the Torah is 40 years. Okay, a little more than 40 years, right? Because they were in Egypt for 210 years, right? But then Yaakov Levi died, so about 100 years. So it's about 140 years, give or take. Moshe Rabbeinu was born, so it's about 140 years, 150 years is the rest of the Torah, where the Book of Bereshis is more somewhere around the 2,000, 2,500 year mark. So just to recognize that the difference between the Book of Bereshis and the rest of the Torah, which really then continues and talks about the Jewish people becoming a nation and all their experience in the Midbar, in the desert, until they came into the land of Eretz Yisrael. So this is a quick introduction just to sort of get a framework of the difference between the Book of Bereshis and the rest of the Torah regarding that point. The other point we have to just remember and focus on and learn from also is that this is starting the exile, right? Starting the exile. I know we said last week's Parsha, really the exile started. I mentioned this in the sermon, right? That's why the book of Vayechi, Sefer Vayechi is stuma, it's closed, it doesn't have a beginning, right? It sort of just merges in with the Parsha beforehand, that's Yaakov dies, and sort of the beginning of the exile. But the shibud, the slavery, right, the actual hardship of the slavery starts in this week's parsha. After all the Shvatim, all the 12 tribes passed away, this is when sort of the actual physical slavery started in this week's parsha, and then the exodus, leading to the exodus of Egypt, which was going to happen in a few weeks' parshas, but starting now with God speaking to Moshe, which we'll talk to him about. So it's just something to reflect on and to think about, because the Jewish people's majority of its existence has been in exile, right? If you think about it, right, the majority of the Jewish people's existence has been in exile, which is a little funny, right? I mean, it's not funny like haha, but like a little funny, something to think about and to reflect on. We lived in the land of Israel for about 800 years before the destruction of the first temple. We lived for another 400 odd years, 410, 420 years during the second temple. And even during the Second Temple, it wasn't completely under our control. In the beginning, it was under the Persians, and then we broke free of them. Then we had a little independence. Then it was the Greeks, and then there was a little independence, and then it was the Romans. And even the Second Temple, even when we're in the land of Israel, we don't call it an exile because we had the temple. But even then, we weren't completely under our own control. But let's just call that not exile, right? The Greek exile was for a period of time. Let's just call it not exile. The Jewish people, right, were about 1,200 years without, let's give or take, about 1,200 years not being in exile. And this current exile is over 2,000 years already. And then in Egypt, and then the Persian exile was 70 years. So it's something to dwell on and something to think about. I just want to give one idea, and then we'll go into some of the ideas in this week's parsha. But sometimes it's important to see a broader picture of things as we go into the book of Shemos. Why is it that Kadosh Baruch Hu, God created us, that we are primarily in exile? And I want to tell you something. I just thought of this now. It's something that happened to me today. Very interesting question. I had to take my car to the dealer this morning. I had an appointment. Baruch Hashem, it's a recall, so they're paying for it. So thank God. So the dealer could try to pretend charge the $500 for each screw, but it's fine, because they're paying for it. So they drove me back, and it was first just to see what they had to do. And then I picked up the car about 12, and then in a week's time they have to order the parts, and it's going to be there for a little while. Thank God they're going to pay for the rental car too. It's good. The dealers, it's a recall, and they're taking care of everything. But on the way to pick up my car, I was in my office and in school, and I needed a ride, so I took a lift. I took a lift to the dealership, and I took a lift to the dealership, but this story actually happened coming back from the dealer. So they gave me they had a ride for me to come back. I was driving with a nice guy, I don't know, probably about 70, something like that, somewhere in that age. He retired, and he does this as sort of a side job, he's a driver to drive people back. From Pittsburgh, we had a nice conversation about the football and everything. So he's all excited, they're still in, the Steelers are still in. He was all excited. But then he asked me if he could ask me a question. I said, yeah, go ahead, go for it, He said, I was just wondering, why is it that everybody hates you? Right? Why is it that everybody hates you? I was like, this is only like a 10-minute car ride. It's only a 10-minute car ride. What am I supposed to answer you? So first I started off, I said, first of all, that's a great question. I said, but first of all, we're very grateful for the country that we're living in, right? That we're able to live here in peace overall. That there is, of course, a little bit of anti-Semitism, but we're very grateful. It's a lot better than other countries that some of our brethren are living in, especially that also different times of history. We're very grateful, and we say special prayer, thanking the country that we live in, and it should continue this way. That's our first start up. I have to make sure we're talking to a non-Jew, right? We have to show that respect, and we are, thank God, living at a time where we're very grateful. Of course, there's anti-Semitism here, and Scott Biando sent out an email, be careful this area. Of course, there's things, but overall, we have to be very, very grateful that we're living at a time, that we are able to practice, and we have to thank God for that. And then I thought about it for a minute. So I said, it's a good question. It's a good question. I said, there's a theory, and I was just being a little hesitant because I'm thought, there's a theory that sometimes, I believe in the Bible, and God chose us to be the chosen people. So sometimes people, don't like that. I wasn't going to go into the whole thing of this halakha, Esav shones Yaakov, Esav hates Yaakov. It's part of the framework of the world, and it wasn't the time, the place, to go into that. I said, why does the bully pick on the little kid in the playground? I said, but I said it's a good question, and it made me start thinking. Of course, there's answers to it, and I could give you a whole class on this of why that is. I've given classes on this in the past, right? But related to our conversation today, the Jewish people, God created us in a way, and it needs time to reflect on it, to think about it. And we're not going to answer the question completely today. I'm saying this straight out. There are answers out there, right? I've given classes on this. I'm going to give a very quick, short, answer. There's more depth that has to go into it because we have this is a Parsha class. It's not a class on anti-Semitism and the Jewish people, right? But since we are talking about Gullus, it sort of ties in a little bit to our conversation of this is the beginning of the exile. This is sort of the beginning of the Jewish people. Even Avram Avinu, he had to go here and they kicked out of Mitzrayim and kicked out. Even our forefathers, sort of when we were created, but really this is when the Jewish people are considered B'nai Yisrael and starting to do that, wandering around for 40 years, primarily in exile. We see that God created it this way first. If you could just turn yourself on mute, please, I'd appreciate it. Right? This is something that we see that God created that this is part of our DNA, part of our framework, that until Mashiach comes, until the Messianic era, and we are free of all of Kol Am Yaretz Yeruchon, all the nations of the world will know you, as we say in Rosh Hashanah, right? And it will be God's glory will be present all over the world, right? To fix the world in God's presence when we're at that time, right? And the ultimate redemption, and God will bring down the third temple, right? Until then, part of our job is, right, to be that vein that goes through history and go through, to be all over and to try to spread that light, and not only for other people, but to work on ourselves to realize that this is not the ultimate purpose in life. Right? This is not the ultimate purpose in life. Our existence in this world is not for tranquility in this world. That's not our purpose. Our purpose in this world is to elevate our neshama, to elevate our soul. So really, our neshama, our soul, and I'm saying something very deep right now, but I'm going to try to put it down. And again, we're going to spend a little more time on this, but that's it, right? Our neshama, our soul, really is in exile itself too, right? It's in a foreign object. Our physical body is a foreign object to the neshama. The ultimate thing of the neshama, the soul, which is the essence of who we are, is to be under God's glory and embracing God's spirituality, whatever that means, and being donated, and to be glued and to be nurtured from God's glory, and that's the greatest enjoyment that the neshama could have. That's the ultimate purpose. It is brought down in many different places, right? That's our purpose in this world, and therefore our neshama itself is in exile. Right? Our neshama is in exile, but it's in this exile in order to be able to receive reward. Because in the realm of neshama, the realm of spirituality, there's no free will. There is no struggle. An angel has no free will. It knows the glory of God. It's like taking a cup of Drano and say, hey, do you want a cup? You have no free will. In theory, you do, but practically, you have no free will to drink it. You know it's going to kill you. Right? So an angel has no free will if there's no materialistic world that God created, this phenomena of our neshama being placed into our physical body. We would have no free will. We have no free will. We get no reward. We get no reward if we know for sure we're going to do it. That's easy, right? For the struggle, that's where you get reward. You only build your muscles when it hurts. No pain, no gain, right? That's when you build your muscles. That's when you grow. That's when you develop yourself. So God placed our neshama into a physical body, which is sort of foreign to our neshama, which is in essence in exile. And therefore the Jewish people are primarily in exile, right? Because we sinned and we weren't able to bring the utopia, right? But primarily in exile. That way is how we grow, and that way is how we grow the world. Our purpose is to bring glory into every aspect of the world, and that's how we grow the world. And why is there anti-Semitism? Because number one, it's part of the fiber of the world that God created, that Esav Sonius Yaakov. The Talmud tells us a halakha, just like there's a halakha that you have to shake the four species, the halakha that Esav, right, the Jacob's brother Esav Sonius Yaakov, there's a intrinsic hatred in between the two brothers, right? And Esav hates Yaakov because of he stole the blessings, and he stole this and he stole that, and it wasn't stealing, it was outright. But Esav is not the one that wants to work on himself and grow. He just wants to be not feeling like his neshama, his soul is in exile, but feeling that this is his place. And therefore, when he sees something that opposite that, he has a hatred for that. Right? Just like human, and that's part of human nature. When you see someone that is doing something that sort of going against what you believe in or what you think is, and you, even though they don't think they're better than you, but you think that they think they're better than you, right? Part of human nature is to hate that person, to persecute that person. And that's the essence of exile. And we're going to see that's what happened in the beginning of Shemos, right? It says that Vayar Melech Mitzrayim, right? Let's look inside. It says, where is it? Yeah, look at verse 9 on page 292, verse 9, right? And in English 293, he told his nation, right? Look, the nation of Israel, they're number and stronger than we. And the next verse says, let's come, let us outsmart, at least because I'm numerous. And when our enemies will come, they will join them and kick us out of the land. Pharaoh was paranoid, right? He thought that they were slaves, right? They were second class. They were minding their own business, trade, this, that. Pharaoh felt that he felt threatened by them. And therefore he said, look, they're going to join our enemies and they're going to overthrow us and take us out. Does it sound familiar? The Jewish people are running everything, right? We're controlling the market, controlling this, controlling that, right? This is already from Mitzrayim, that this is a paranoia, right, of how they felt, right, because of what our mission is, because of what our job is. And that's, again, there's a lot more to expand on this and other sources, and this is not the place for it. Right, but this is really what exile is all about, and this is really what our mission is. Right, is all about, is to be above that and say, I am doing because what I think is right. Right, I'm trying to connect to God. I'm trying to grow, elevate my neshama, and not be in the exile of my body, but on the contrary, transform my physical body into something more spiritual, and utilize it and work in harmony with my physical body to be able to do the mitzvot. And that's why we mentioned this in the past. That's why the majority of the mitzvos are something physical: putting on tefillin, eating food, shaking lulav and estrog, wearing a yarmulke, an eruv, laws of Shabbat, and making kiddush, drinking wine. Marriage is a physical mitzvah. Having children. The majority of the mitzvos are something physical. And there's something physical because part of our getting out of this sort of exile is working together, is elevating our physical body and utilizing our physical body to be able to elevate our neshama and to start working together there as one unit. And that's also our purpose in the existence of this world, is to elevate the world through our existence and to just be the light unto the nations. That's what it means, right? And that's why the majority of our existence is in exile, because until we're able to accomplish that, we haven't done our purpose. Right, and that's also why there's hatred too, right? Because when other people feel threatened, and of course it's not everyone, right? There's plenty of righteous Gentiles, right? Plenty of righteous Gentiles that have helped Jews during their hardest time. Plenty of righteous Gentiles now. Plenty of people that help us and love Israel and want us to succeed and realize that we're the chosen people. And I could go on stories for that too. Right, 1 second. Right, but this is sort of the overall idea. And that's the beginning of this week's parsha, the concept of exile. Go ahead. So the question is, does our neshama have any influence in how our body lives? So that's a challenge, right? And I've given classes on this in the past, right? I think some of them I might have started recording those already. It might be on my YouTube channel, right? From early days, from when I was still in Jacksonville, right? But I gave a class on what is free will, right? And that is, the free will actually is a struggle between our physical body and our neshama to ensure the physical body wants to not be spiritual and to be part of the physical world and to enjoy the physical pleasures, and the neshama wants to do more spiritual things, right? So it's the more we elevate our neshama through exercise, by doing mitzvot, and by coming to synagogue, and by thinking of Torah thoughts, coming to classes, the more we elevate it, the more our neshama gets stronger and then is able to start influencing more parts of the body. And that commentary say that's what it means in ethics of our father, mitzvah Gureris mitzvah. When you do one mitzvah, it causes another mitzvah. Right? It's a reward, but it's more of a cause and effect. When you do one mitzvah, so you're elevating your body to do that mitzvah. If it's opening the door for someone, saying a nice word to someone, wearing your yarmulke, coming to synagogue, making a blessing, not speaking lashon hara, keeping a little Shabbat, whatever it is that we're doing, right? So when you're doing that, you're strengthening your neshama, and then that propels you to do another mitzvah. So yeah, it sort of has that struggle. It's that dual struggle, but the ultimate purpose is eventually to overtake that, and that your physical body now is working in sync with your neshama. Okay, we're going to move on. I spent a little more time on this than I wanted to, but that's fine. It's a very important topic. And as I said, we could give classes on this. Okay, so what I want to start off with is we're going to stay on page 292, and we're going to, a very interesting verse, the commentaries I'll ask on this. So it goes through, these are the names of the children of Israel, of Yisrael, that came to Mitzrayim. It goes Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zebulun, and in the end it says, all the verse, that is verse 5. All the souls that came out of Yaakov were 70. But Yosef, and Yosef was in Egypt. And all the commentaries ask, Rashi asks, right? We know that Yosef was in Mitzrayim, right? So why did I have to say that Yosef was in Mitzrayim? We know that. Right? We just finished all the parshas before that Yosef was sold to Mitzrayim, and first he blamed his brothers that they were spies, and then Yaakov comes down, and everything. We know that Yosef was Mitzrayim. So why does the Torah have to add an extra 3 words? Yosef Hayav Mitzrayim. We know there's not an extra letter in the Torah. So why does the Torah tell us Yosef Hayav Mitzrayim? And there's a famous idea. The commentaries explain that that Mitzrayim, right? That Yosef Hayav Mitzrayim, that Yosef, even though he was in Mitzrayim, he was still Yosef. He didn't become Joseph. He didn't become Safnas Parneach. He didn't become this. He didn't become that. He was still Yosef, even though he was in Mitzrayim. He did not allow Mitzrayim to change who he was. Right? Even though he was in Mitzrayim before all his brothers came down, before Yosef, before there was a yeshiva, before there was a synagogue, before there was day school for the kids, right? He still did not allow that to affect them. But Yosef, Yosef still stayed in Mitzrayim, even though it says that we know that before. So it's not coming to tell us a geographical idea where Yosef was. That we know, but it's telling us a concept that even though he lived in Mitzrayim without any influence, he still is able to retain the status of Yosef, which is one of the 12 tribes. And that's something that we could reflect on. We're grateful, thank God. We have a synagogue, we have a shul, and we have day schools for our kids. We have kosher food, maybe not the same as Chicago and other places, but we do still have the kosher food, right? We have some of these amenities, and we have spiritual, we have classes, and we have opportunities to grow, right? So how much more so do we have to make sure that we stay to be the Yosef, to make sure that we grow and we become, we're Chaim, we're Avram, we're Yaakov, we're Sarah, we're Rivka, we're Hannah, whoever we are, right? That we make sure that we retain that and we grow. And we keep on growing to make sure that we retain our spirituality and grow in our spirituality and not allow the society to affect that. Okay, let's move on. So we spoke about a new king came up just very quickly, right? V'yakam el chadas, a new king. There's an argument, is the new king really, or did he pretend to be a new king? We spoke about that last year, so feel free to look up last year's class on YouTube. And then it goes through that he wanted to kill all the boys, right? Throw all the boys in. Midrash tells us because he got his astrologers told him that a boy's going to be born that's going to save the Jewish people. And the Mayaldos, the midwives, right? He told them to kill the babies first, and they didn't kill the babies. They listened. We spoke about that a little bit also, that they were willing to put their lives on the line, not to kill the Jewish babies and not listen to the king, the most powerful king in that era, right? And they did not listen, and they feared God. Spoke about that last year. Also, the idea of we all have to reflect internally and say, how are we sacrificing? How are we showing God that we fear God more than our boss, fear God more than our than the country, or we fear God, or we want to have a relationship with God more than the materialistic world? We all have this, that we have to have something to reflect and say, we have to show that we are standing with God, right? And the Torah and the mitzvos and the Mialdas did that, willing to put their lives on the line, right? And Jewish people throughout history have done that. What are we doing, right, to show that? What are we sacrificing? Are we sacrificing Monday Night Football, right? Are we come to Partners in Torah, right? Are we sacrificing, something else? Are we sacrificing going out with some friends to a non-kosher restaurant because I decided I'm not going to eat non-kosher anymore, and they don't want to go to somewhere else? Right? What are we sacrificing? What are we sacrificing? And that's what we have to learn from the midwives. The heroism are willing to sacrifice their lives, not to kill the babies. Okay, then we're up to chapter 2, and it says, Vayelech ish beis Levi, a man went from the house of Levi. We know that's Amram, and he took the daughter of Levi, that's Yocheved, right? And then he had Moshe, right? She gave birth early, and she put the baby in a basket, right? All the kindergarten kids, if it's Sunday school or in preschool, they all come home with a little baby Moshe, right? In the little basket, right? And he put him into the Nile. And the verse 5 says, "Baterid bas Paro lirchotz al yar," the daughter of Paro came to wash herself in the river. Rashi says, according to some commentaries, right, she was actually coming to convert to Judaism, right? That's why she went to the river to go to the mikveh, and whatever Judaism was at the time, but to move away from her father. That's another whole lesson by itself, right? Her what's it called again? Servants go with her, right? And she sees the basket in the water. But tishlach es amasa, the end of the verse says she sticks out her amasa, and she grabs it. What is amasa? Right? So there's two commentaries. One Rashi brings down. One says amasa is like from a maidservant. So she v'tikach. Vatishlach Samasi, she sent out her maidservants. But a lot of the commentaries don't like that. Grammatically, that doesn't make sense. It should have said Vashalach, and she sent. Right? So Rashi brings on another commentary. Vatishlach Samasa, Amasa comes from arms. She stuck out her arm, famous midrash, stuck out her arm, and her arm stretched out. And it reached the baby, right? And she was able to drag it back in. It's what is it, like Green Lantern or something, is able to stick their hands out very far. Okay, I know. I speak a lot about superheroes. I like superheroes. Sorry. Right. Right. So I think it's that one, right? Maybe it's someone else. But she stuck it all out, and she was able to bring the baby in. So the Kotzker Rebbe, he lived in the 1800s, late 1800s, famous. He had a lot of beautiful ideas for elevation and self-motivation, and big Rebbe, big tzaddik. Right? So he says something very powerful over here. He says that, actually I saw they bring this down in the English over here commentaries, but we'll just expand on it a little bit. The Kotzker says that the Torah is telling us, the Torah is teaching us what's the purpose it needs to tell us, right? So Bas Paras, our hands stuck out. What's the mirror? Like, why is Rashi telling us this, and what's the purpose for telling us that she stuck out? So she got the baby. Who cares how she got the baby? The Kotzker says something very powerful. He says that the Torah is telling us that don't ever say that I just can't do it. Don't ever say I can't do it. Right? She stuck out. You think when she stuck out her hand, she thought that her hand was going to extend. Right? She didn't think her hand was going to extend, but she put the effort in. You have to show that you care. It's a baby basket that's going down the river. So you stick your hands out. I want to help. Right? I want to do something. Right? I'm going to try. I'm going to do the effort. Right? If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But at least I have to put the effort in. I have to try. Right? So that's what the Torah is saying. Yes, Hashem made a miracle, and she was able to grab the baby. But sometimes someone won't do that, and maybe yes, you put all your effort in, you're not able to do it, but at least you have to try. Right? So don't ever say, right, that you can't do this. And the Talmud, the famous passage in Talmud that says, "You got the matzasa Talmud." If someone toils and he finds, means to say, if someone toils in Torah to try to understand Torah, to understand mitzvahs, to try to grow in Torah, if he puts the time and effort into it, to come to classes, to come to synagogue, to come to shul, to learn about new mitzvot, to reflect internally and say, okay, how am I going to grow? What am I going to take the next step? And he finds it, and he sees that he's able to grow and take that next step. Come and believe it. But if someone doesn't toil, doesn't try hard, and he says, oh, I found it, I'll come and don't believe it. If you try hard and you don't find it, I'll come and don't believe it either. Right? Because when one tries hard in spirituality, if you put the effort, you come to classes, you learn online, you put your time and your effort to say, I want to take that next step. I want to get closer to Hashem. Hashem will help you out. Hashem will stick out your hand and say, I'm going to help you out to understand, to be able to find it. Oh my gosh, the house just came up on the market, right? Perfect timing. I can move into the area. Beautiful, right? Look at that, right? Okay, so the market, when I was able to sell my house more, okay, you figure it out, right? You want to start being able to walk the shul on Shabbos, right? You want to start being able to buy kosher food. You want to be able to stop speaking Lashon Hara. You want to be able to start wearing whatever you want to start doing, whatever level one is doing. If you want to start lighting Friday night candles, it doesn't make a difference where you're holding, right? But you got the mitzvah, you try hard, and you must comment. Believe that. Believe it that you're going to win, right? And that's what the Torah is telling us. You have to put the effort out. You have to try it. So in the materialistic world, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. In the spiritual world, it definitely will. But if you don't try, if you don't put the effort, if you don't think about it, you don't reflect about it, then for sure it's not going to happen, right? Okay, I'm good where I am. Okay, right? Then you want to say baby Moshe, right? Basya is the one that called Moshe. Moshe's name comes from Basya, right? From the daughter of Paro. Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem calls him Moshe Avdi, Moshe my servant. His mother gave him a name. He had other names, but the one that the Torah decides to use is the one that the daughter of Paro, a non-Jew, right? The daughter of Paro who persecuted the Jewish people. That's the name that the Torah decides to use. Out of gratitude, out of showing that you tried, that's because she infused in Moshe, right? She infused in Moshe this idea, right? That's what Moshe means. From the water, I dragged you out. What is it? From the water. Okay, very nice. That's no. She infused in Moshe the idea of never giving up and never saying, I'm not going to try. That's what the Torah says. That's why Moshe is called Moshe, and that's what the energy of Moshe was. That he never said, I'm not going to try. Never said, I can't do this, right? And that's the lesson that we have to learn from here, right? From the daughter of Paro. Okay, let's move on. Right, so the whole episode, the whole story, right? He doesn't nurse because he doesn't nurse from non-Jewish midwives. Right, so Yocheved was standing there on the side, and Jews are smart in business. She got her mother to be the midwife, to be to nurse her own son, and she got paid for it. Right, look at that. Right, got paid for nursing her own son. Right, and then it says that. Moshe got older, and so let's turn the page to 298, verse 11. It says, and it was those days, Moshe got older, he went out to his brethren, he saw in their pain, right? He saw a man, a Mitri, hitting an Ivri from one of his brothers, from his brother. And then it continues with, and it continues with the story, right, of this whole story where he hit him. He said, why are you hitting him? He killed him. He looked here and there. He killed Dimitri, right? He buried him, right? And then it says the next day, he saw one person, two of his brothers hitting each other. He said, Russia, Russia, why do you hit your friend? Right, and that's a famous line, and the Talmud says, whoever raises their hands to hit their friend is called a rasha. It's called evil, right? Even if you don't hit, but just by raising your hand to want to hit another brother, another person, right? That's called a rasha. It's called the evil person, right? And then the other person, what are you going to kill me like you killed that Mitri? And Moshe realized that the story came out. Pharaoh tried to kill him. He was able to run away. The Midrash tells us that he actually captured him, but his neck turned to marble, and the sword, the axe bounced back, and Moshe was able to escape. And then he goes to Midian, and then it's the whole story with Midian, with Yisro's daughters by the well. Again, a Jewish person finds his shidduch by the well. I guess, to save the shidduch crisis, we just create a lot of wells out there, right, and let them all mingle at the well. right? Because Yaakov found his wife at the well, Eliezer found Yitzchak's wife by the well, Moshe found his wife by the well, right? And that's the story of going into the story of Israel, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, right? But what I want to talk about here for a minute is the Torah. Again, remember, there's not an extra letter in the Torah. It's not a storybook, right? And whatever is written in the Torah and how it's written is something to learn from. So the Torah tells us, back to verse 11, and it was those days, right? He went out to his brothers, right? And he saw in their pain. Now remember, Moshe Rabbeinu, the Midrash tells us that for the first few years, he learned with his father, Amram, right? But primarily, where did he grow up? He grew up in Paro's house, right? He was sort of the prince. He grew up in Paro's house. Yes, he knew he was Jewish because, he learned with his father and he would go back and forth, right? The Midrash tells us, but primarily he was in Paro's house and he was a prince, right? He was Basia's, Paro's daughter's sort of adopted son. Vayigdal, Moshe got bigger. Good. What's the Torah trying to tell us? Okay. Oh, he grew up. Well, it's saying that, and it was those days, and Moshe went out. Why does it have to say Vayigdal? He got up. He grew up. So I saw this idea brought down and sort of formulating myself a little bit, right? But the Torah is trying to tell us that this really was sort of the first time the Moshe Rabbeinu was old enough, right, and sort of mature enough to go out. And what did Moshe do? Right? If you're a teenager is old enough to go out, right? They go out with their friends. Of course they go to school and learn Torah and whatever it is. But my daughter this past month of Shabbos, she drives. Oh my gosh, right? And she asked me, can I take some friends to Corner Cafe? I was like, okay, right? Again, of course, here I go. Losing my hair already, right? Thank God I have it, right? But it's like you're all nervous, But she, okay, Baruch Hashem, she went out with her friends, went to Corn Cafe, then they went to Target, and then they, went back, and then they came home. Everything was fine, right? But that's what they do, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Everything's kosher. Not something that's not kosher, but you go out and hang out with your friends. You go to the bowling alley. You go whatever it is, do whatever teenagers do. What does the Torah say? Moshe grew up. Moshe was, he was growing up. He was sort of, and he went out, but where did he go? He went to his brothers. But and he had the maturity level to see their pain and to feel their pain, right? And he saw in every Makkah Achiv, he called him his brother. Right? Yeah, he knew he was a Jew, but he's also elementary. He was a king. He was Paro's grandson, adopted grandson. No, called the Ivri Achiv. Similar to like we started off with Yosef, that Yosef did not allow the influence of society to affect him. Manasseh and Ephraim, like we spoke about last week's parsha, why were they chosen? It's because they were able to withstand being the VIP kids, right, and still becoming a Shevet, becoming one of the tribes and growing to be Manasseh and Ephraim. They were on the level of Reuben and Shimon. Right? So too Moshe. Right? The Torah is telling us that what was in the core of Moshe? Vayar b'sivlosim. He saw in his brother's pain. And that was the Nakuda, that was a point of Moshe's leadership. A leader and a Jewish person has to see Vayar b'sivlosim. He has to see in his brother's pain. If he knows them, if he doesn't know them, right? If they're in his class or they're not in his class, class of society, right? Even Jews feel they're in different classes of society. Well, right? I drive up with my whatever, and right? Even yes, right? We have that too, unfortunately, right? Doesn't make a difference. We're all brothers and sisters, and that was the leadership of Moshe. Vayar b'sivlosam. He went out and he saw their pain. The first thing he wanted to do as he started maturing was to reconnect with his brethren and to see what's going on with them. He has it all good and comfortable in his castle, right? And he could just live and pretend that nothing's going on. That's not what he did. So too we. Thank God, as we mentioned, we're living in a time where we are able to, be prosperous, and we're able to But we can't just close our eyes and say, well, we're here in America and we're good. It's not good, right? But we don't have to worry about our brothers in Iran and our brothers in Israel and our brothers in France and our brothers in England and our brothers in Canada, wherever they are. No. That's part of the DNA of a Jewish person. We are all achim. We're all brothers and sisters, and we have to care and feel the pain of every one of our siblings. Right? Be it if we know what their names are, if we don't know what their names are, if they speak Spanish, French, English, Japanese, it doesn't make a difference. Right? We are all brothers and sisters. We can't just feel comfortable and say, well, we're comfortable in our, or even here in America, right? No, don't bother me. I'm okay. I'm not going to rock the boat. I don't want to get involved in what's going on over here because, I have my comfort. I have my job and I'm at this. And, I pretend like I'm not Jewish, or sometimes I pretend I'm not Jewish, and then I'm good. No, we have to see the pain of our brothers. If it's making sure that our institutions are taken care of, it's making sure that Tomchei Shabbos is providing food for the poor, right? Our Bikkur Cholim house, right? Our federate, whatever it is, right? Our institutions, we have to take care of it. We have to unite together and say we are achim, we are brothers and sisters, and that's the leadership of Moshe, and that's what we all have to do. To learn from Moshe that we can't just feel secure in our castle. Right? We have to go out of our comfort zone. Say we are going to care for our brothers and sisters. We're going to take care of them, right? And even if it might hurt us, right? Even if Moshe was then exiled, right? The next day he had to run out, right? We have to care about achiv, every one of our siblings, and that's the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, well, let's a few more things, and then we'll end. Just FYI, I don't know if you guys know, there's a very beautiful program tonight at 8:15 in New City Shul, right? I forgot his name. He's speaking. He runs the Chafetz Chaim Heritage Foundation. It's a beautiful organization. His name is Michal Rothschild, right? He started the Chafetz Chaim Heritage Foundation. From ordinary living to extraordinary blessing. That's the topic tonight. A really important person. I plan on going afterwards. It's at 8:15 tonight in New City Shul. So just let's wrap up a few more things over here. So the Torah now, after that, the Torah, as we mentioned, goes into the Moshe Rabbeinu runs to Mitzrayim, to Midian, and the story with the daughters of Yisro. Yisro is introduced into the story. Now, who is Yisro? Yisro is a very interesting person. And the Medrash tells us that Paro had 3 advisors, and sort of fits into the narrative of what we're trying to point out today. Right? Paro had 3 advisors. Right? One of them was Yisro. One of them was Bilam. Right? Bilam, we're going to be introduced to him later on, right, when he tries to curse the Jewish people and turns into blessings. And the other one is Eov. Eov there's a prophet. There's one of the books of Tanakh. It's called Eov. And Eov is a book of all the struggles that Eov, all the persecution, all the struggles and tests that Eov went through. He lost his children, he lost his business. It's a very, very hard book to read. It's one of the books of the prophets, scribers, right? But it says that one of them was Eov. And Paro asked the 3 advisors what to do with the Jewish problem. Right? That sounds familiar. Right? What to do with the Jewish problem? So it says Yisro said, "There's no problem. Leave them alone. Right? Just leave them alone. Everything's fine. Don't worry about it." Bilam gave the advice of persecuting them and enslaving them and killing them. Because Eov kept quiet. Eov didn't say anything. He felt it was wrong to do that, but he didn't feel comfortable enough to stick up. And then Yisro escaped. Right? Yisro had to escape, and that's why he moved to Midian. Right? And Bilam eventually moved out and became a prophet, so he was wealthy and very successful. And Eov had this life of struggle. But at the end of the day, Yisro is the one that was rewarded with having Moshe Rabbeinu as his son-in-law, right? Moshe Rabbeinu as son. So the commentaries ask, we understand Bilam, he ended up dying, right? At the end of the day, he got killed. We understand, right? He gave the bad decree. He gave the bad advice to kill the Jewish people. Yisro, we understand, right? He stood up to Paro, and he was willing to to take the brunt of it. So he got rewarded by having Moshe Rabbeinu as a son-in-law. But what? He didn't do anything. So why did he get punished with terrible persecution of tsar and persecution? And and pain, a life full of pain. Right? Why did he get punished with that? If he didn't do anything, he just kept quiet. And the commentaries say exactly, because when there's a concept in the Talmud, the halachic reason and halacha, right? If I come and tell you, I said, Jeff, you owe me $100, right? And you don't say anything, right? There's something called shtika kahoda, right? When one is quiet, it's considered as he admits to that. Right? There's a halakhic aspect of shtika kahoda. The one is quiet, he considered he's admitting to that idea. It's a halakhic reason. So the commentary says by Eov keeping quiet, even though internally he knows it's a terrible thing, but he just didn't feel like he could stand up. But the way he looks, by him not standing up, it's like he agreed to what was going on. Shtika kahoda, by being quiet, shows like you're okay with what's going on, and that's why he got punished. Right? You can get death like Bilam, right? But he got punished to get rid of this thing. And this is something that we all have to reflect on. And we're living in a time that sometimes we feel it's hard to stand up to what's right. Right? And we have to know the right time. And not always is it the right time to speak up. But what is right is what the Torah tells us is right. What is not right is not what society tells us is right. What is right is not what Hollywood tells us is right. What is right is not what our politicians tells us is right. What is right is what the Torah tells us right. If we understand it, if we don't understand it, right? And therefore, we have to be very careful, right? And again, I'm not saying to start walking around with bumper stickers and we love every person. It has nothing to do with what we feel about the individual. But what is right, we have to stand up for it. And if you have a conversation about something, and you decide, I don't want to get into a sticky situation. I don't want to, get the Shabbos meal, whatever. Or you have to be, but by you keeping quiet, if the other opinion was raised and sort of no one is saying that that's wrong, right, or that's against the Torah law, right? Again, nothing to. I have plenty of friends that I've gone to play pool with, that don't follow the Torah law. Right, on many aspects, right? Some are a little more sensitive than others in our society, right? But if you don't speak up and say, "Hey, no, this is what the Torah tells us," you don't have to say that that's wrong. You could say, "This is what I believe. This is what the Torah tells us." When we keep quiet, we are admitting to what the other opinion is being. If there's no one voicing the other opinion, right, then we're admitting to that, and that's something that it's a hard thing. It's not all or nothing, and it doesn't happen overnight. But it's something to reflect on and to think about. That if we believe in something, right? If we believe in the Torah, we believe in Hashem, right? Just because our society has created an environment where we have a hard time understanding that, right? Again, it has nothing to do with the individual. It has to do with the law, with what's right and wrong. It has nothing to do with the individual. We all have struggles. There's not a righteous person in the world that doesn't sin. Right? But if someone tells you there's only 612 mitzvahs in the Torah because that mitzvah doesn't apply because in 2026 that mitzvah doesn't apply, which I've heard this from people, right? It just doesn't apply nowadays, right? So that's going against the Torah, right? If you say, yes, I have a physical urge, right? Then we have struggles and okay, I don't know the halakha so well and I'm trying to figure it out. I grew up differently and I'm working on that. So that's, you believe in God, you believe in the Torah. We all struggle. I promise you, I struggle too. We all struggle. There's not a righteous person in the world that doesn't sin. That's very different than philosophically believing that that's not what that it's something against the Torah. Right? And I know this is a little harsh, and I know I'm being recorded, right? But this is something that we have to reflect on. I'm not going to mention any examples because there's so many different examples, so many different things. There's plenty of things that some people feel that this it's not in 2026. That's just not the way we do it. I've been told this, Rabbi, 2026. Really, you think God cares about this right now? Yes, I have to tell them God does care about it. Right, the 2026, 2020, 1897, right, 1051 doesn't make a difference. Right, God cares about it because if He didn't, He would have put a clause in the Torah. It says in 2026, this the halakha doesn't apply. There is no clause like that in the Torah, and God knows everything. God knows how we were going to be in 2026. And therefore, right, again, it has to be the right time, it has to be the right way, but it's something to reflect on. At least afterwards, tell yourself, said, okay, or tell people that you're close with, that if the person leaves, right, that's not what the Torah tells us. Different people have different struggles with the Torah or whatever it is, right? I don't know what the right thing to say is right now. I'm not talking about every case is different, every situation is different. Depends on who it is. It depends on what your relationship with them is. If there's any relationship, I'm not. It depends on what the mitzvah, what the transgression. There's so many different variables, right? So that's not the point in trying to bring out what you say. Right? The point is that by being quiet, right? Again, and if it's a situation where someone says, and I'm being very careful of this, when someone says that this is something that is not applicable nowadays, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about where someone's struggling, someone's having a hard time, right? With if it's kosher, if it's Shabbos, if it's lashon hara, if it's robbing, if it's stealing, if it's tax evasion, or if it's whatever it is, right? To many other struggles, right? Doesn't make a difference. We all have our struggles. But if someone goes out says that this is something that's nowadays is not part of the Torah or it's not applicable, right? That's something that we have to make sure that can't be completely quiet about it, right? And that's what happened over here with Eo. He was quiet, and that's considered like we're admitting. And it's not an easy thing to swallow, right? It's something to reflect on, but it's something that we have to think about, because that's what happens in the beginning. As though I don't want to rock the boat, I don't want this. But we have to say what's right and wrong, right? We do. We have to say what's right and wrong, and we understand that in some secular laws, right? So why not in Jewish law too, right? If you believe in the Torah, if you believe in that, right, that's something that we have to do. We're going to end with one more thing, right? We're going to a very beautiful idea. The Torah tells us that after Moshe Rabbeinu has the whole story with the burning bush, right? It was actually a thorn bush, right? Why was it a thorn bush? Because God's showing that even though God doesn't get prickled by the thorn bush, but God is showing that I'm with pain with the Jewish people. He showed him in a thorn bush, which is prickly and painful, to show that God is with, whenever the Jewish people are in pain, he's in pain with them. That's not what I want to say. It's after that, it says, finally, Moshe Rabbeinu agrees to take on the leadership, right? And that's a whole interesting story, the whole back and forth. And then it says that God told Moshe Rabbeinu that Aaron, your brother, so I'm just looking for the place, I say it outside in the meantime, so Aaron, your brother, is going to meet you. Right, and it says over here, second. It says that Aaron, your brother, will greet you. I don't remember the exact wording. I apologize. Give me one more second, and I'll just say it outside. Okay, I found it. Page 308. The wait was worth it. I had page 308 on the bottom of verse 14. Says, okay, God got angry at Moshe Rabbeinu because he asked him to send it with someone else. It's something we have to go into. We're not going to go into right now. But it says like this. He says, Vayomer, hello, Aaron achicha, Halevi, Aaron, your brother, the Levi, Yadati, he knows, he knows that our conversation, and he will be your interpreter. He's coming towards you. And when he sees you, he will rejoice in his heart. Right? So so the commentaries say, right, that the Torah's being is saying, and is saying about Aaron, right, that Aaron was Moshe Rabbeinu's older brother, right? We know brother rivalry. We've had that in Bereshis, right? We had plenty of brother rivalry, and of course, it's all the same. Most of it was the same Shemaim, right? Especially with the Shvatim, the other ones were not, but Moshe Rabbeinu was Aaron's younger brother. And Aaron was the leader of the Jewish people while Moshe Rabbeinu ran away. It says Aaron was leading the Jewish people in the tribe, Aaron and Amram. And now it says, now all of a sudden, Moshe Rabbeinu sort of pops back in. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu, sort of that son, he was living in Paro's house. He had it easy. And then he runs away, and he's away. It says he was away for 80 years, almost 80 years he was away, right? Because he was 80 years old when he stood in front of Paro, right? He was a teenager when he left away, so maybe 60 or 70 years, exactly how long, but he was away for a long time. And Aaron was holding up and in the tribe and going in the trenches and taking care of everything. And all of a sudden, Moshe Rabbeinu comes with, with 2 kids, right? And he's, okay, I'm the leader now, right? How do you think Aaron will feel, right? Aaron will put on a brave face and say, of course, he's a tzaddik, but still, in his heart, maybe a little bit, the Torah says, and he will see you, v'samach b'libo, and he'll be happy in his heart. The Torah is witnessing about Aaron, right? That he will be extremely happy. He's not going to let anything, not a shemetz, not even a little bit of hatred or jealousy or bad feelings in his heart. He will completely be happy for you, and samach will be happy for you, right? And that's Aaron. Oh, it's Shalom road to Shalom. We know Aaron a Cohen was the one that loved peace and ran after peace. Aaron was going to be the Kohen Gadol. He was the one that was going to rear the Urim V'Tumim, the breastplate on his chest that represents all the 12 tribes. Because that was the midah of Aaron. Aaron had the purest heart of love for every person, that even when the situation seemed like he had some kind of right to have even a little bit of jealousy or upsetness that his brother sort of was taking over here, just popping in and all of a sudden taking over, right? The Torah is saying, no, v'samach b'libo, who's happy in his heart. And that's something that we all have to strive for. It doesn't happen overnight, I promise you, right? But something we all have to strive for, to really elevate ourselves to be more like Aaron in that way, right? And to not feel any jealousy, to love every individual, right? To love every person, love your spouse, love your kids, love your parents, love your siblings, love your neighbors, love your congregants. Even if sometimes, there might be a good reason. There is never a good reason, but maybe there's seemingly a good reason to, be upset, to hold some kind of grudge, right? It didn't go your way. You were upset. You spent so much time on a committee and it didn't go your way. Whatever it is, right? There seems to be something that you feel like there might be seemingly a reason that you could hold some kind of grudge. Let's try to be like Aaron, right? Always some loving peace and running after peace, and not hold that grudge and be happy for the other person, right? Samach b'libo is happy in his heart, and that's what Moshe and Aaron's team of leadership was the strongest leadership, right? We spoke about Moshe, but right now Aaron, this idea that Aaron had complete faith in his brother, complete love for his brother, and was completely happy that his brother had this opportunity to grow and to take on this leadership, that any even a tiny little bit of resentment, right? There's no crack in his happiness, and there was no crack in their bond and in their leadership. Thank you all for joining us today, and everybody have a good evening.